Good morning to you. I am Mark Sudduth. It is Thursday, the 23rd of March, 2023, and we need to talk about this potential for destructive hail today in portions of Texas and Oklahoma. The spring severe weather season underway. We've got a slight risk today. That's just a categorical thing. You got to dig deeper. You got to look and see what's going on under the hood, and that's what we're going to do. And then tomorrow, a moderate risk of severe weather. What exactly does that mean? I'll break it all down for you and at least make you aware, especially since we are talking the potential of 2-inch plus hail in parts of Texas and Oklahoma today, and maybe some strong tornadoes tomorrow in parts of Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama. Yes, the Gulf is open for business in terms of bringing in a lot of moisture and energy as these storm systems come across the country. And speaking of storm systems, I'm telling you, we are going full-on Hollywood mode out there. Tornado there in Los Angeles County yesterday. It looked like a hurricane was making landfall in the San Francisco Bay Area the day before, yet it's all very much real, not Hollywood. Sometimes art does imitate life. Isn't that funny how that works? Usually it's the other way around. All right, so let's take a look at what we've got. The Storm Prediction Center, a very important site and part of our Weather Service products. This time of year, going on into the early parts of the summer, that's when the severe weather season is at its peak. We are really starting to ramp up. So listen, these categories that we've got, slight risk today. You know, you look at that, you go, that's just a slight risk. It's yellow, caution, whatever. Like, how do you interpret that? You got to look at the different aspects of this. The tornado threat, and that's 2%. That's not too bad. That's a good thing overall. The wind threat, 5%, so we're starting to ramp it up there, the possibility of some very strong downburst winds. But it is the hail threat that is most substantial. That's why I included it in my thumbnail graphic for today. And just looking at the headline here, looking at their summary, very large and destructive hail will be possible this afternoon into tonight between the Ozark and Edwards Plateaus. When you see a headline like that, and folks, we are talking about hailstones, not a quarter or a golf ball, but 2 inches in diameter or larger. They can be blowing horizontal, so they become very much like missiles at that point. Very destructive for siding, for roofing, for vehicles, car dealerships, mobile homes, anybody with any property out there, cattle. This is a really big problem. Hail causes billions of dollars in damage every single year in the United States. Not a lot of deaths, luckily. I mean, I haven't researched that, but you usually don't hear about people being killed by hailstones. Certainly livestock, because they are out there and exposed. But yes, the threat of severe weather, pretty substantial today, even though it says slight risk. You got to look underneath all of that. That's the point of me doing this, is to educate you and show you exactly what we're talking about here. When we dig in a little bit deeper, and the hail threat is the most substantial. If we read through the discussion here from the Weather Service, this is out of the Storm Prediction Center. This part right here is what is interesting to me the most in terms of that hail, mainly going to be in parts of Oklahoma and into northwest Texas, where the potential of supercell development and 2-inch plus greater diameter hailstones does exist. So take that into consideration. We're going to look at a high-resolution model in just a minute to try to hone in on where potentially this might happen. And then as we go to tomorrow, real quick, tomorrow we have a moderate risk here. The threat of tornadoes is higher. We look at the summary there. Supercell thunderstorms capable of all severe hazards, including strong tornadoes, once again here in the heart of the Deep South, Dixie Alley as we call it. Yes, we need to be watching this into the Mississippi Valley. And it does extend, you know, the heart of it is here in Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas. But even the slight risk gets over into Alabama. The lines of storms that will form and then kind of move across this area will be ongoing for several hours. So don't focus in on just the red area and think, okay, I'm not in the red area, I'm good. Anybody in this area down here, you could have the threat of severe weather, especially later tomorrow and into tomorrow evening. But today, yes, today, day one, that hail threat here, mainly in parts of Oklahoma and Texas over here. This is where I am most concerned about it, and you can get some gorilla hail, as it is often referred to. An interesting article that Fox Weather tweeted out from the Institute for Business and Safety, that's out of the Insurance Institute here. the IBHS as it is colloquially called, or whatever. I'm trying to use big words here. We need to be talking about the big hailstones. That's the point. Yes, hail is a real big problem out there. Ask anybody that is in the insurance adjusting business, and I know several people that support my project through Patreon are themselves in the insurance adjusting business or related fields. Hail is a big, big problem. It is a destructive force. It's fascinating to see. I'm not going to lie. It's an amazing part of the atmosphere, but it can be a real problem when it's coming down 60, 70 miles per hour or blowing, like I said, horizontally sometimes with these very strong downburst winds that gets driven into homes, driven into businesses, your car, your SUV, whatever the case may be, truckers out there, cattle, the livestock industry. Yes, it's very, very impactful. So a lot of interesting stuff here. I'm going to put a link to this article from the IBHS in today's video discussion. Again, that's tweeted from our friends over at Fox Weather. It's the time of year where people start to study these things out in the field. Storm chasers do more than just shoot video and sell it to TV. There's a lot of research going on out there as well. All right, the national weather map here, the watches and warnings, all this green, well, that's from flooding, the potential for flooding. We're going to go over that in just a minute. Got some fog and other related issues down here in the south as we start to finally scour out that cooler air and a more humid air mass. The humid air mass cools off. You get condensation and you get low clouds, or what we call fog, and that'll be a little bit of a problem over the next couple of days until we can really get the air mass to warm up and stay warm throughout the column. Then out west, more wintry weather. Down in LA yesterday, that's where the tornado was. Unbelievable what's been happening out there. We've been watching this all the way to the end of last year through January. I was out there the first part of this year in Santa Cruz in that vicinity. I went up to Truckee and saw the snow with my own two eyes, and I thought back in January there was a lot of snow out there. There's even more now. I think Mammoth just hit 800 inches. That's unbelievable. Just a whole other big story going on out there, but it is related to what happens later in the plains, because some of this energy does come through. It kind of gets mixed around in the Rockies and vicinity, and then that energy makes it out into the plains, rides up and over this big fat ridge that's sitting out over the southwestern Atlantic. We have seen this story over and over again over the last, I don't know, maybe 10 years or so. Just this pattern where you get this strong high pressure in the southwest Atlantic. The storm track seems to be up and over that, and your severe weather is usually somewhere in the deep south, occasionally retrograding back towards the Great Plains, where, I got a lot of drawing here, where we are seeing that today. So this pattern is sort of a rinse and repeat, do it again kind of deal. And I think that's where it's going to be as we progress through spring, and especially with the active storm track from these atmospheric rivers, these pieces of energy that come from the Pacific. And eventually we're going to get these upper level lows that will come in. They will move out into the southwestern United States and into the Great Plains. And we're going to have probably a pretty busy April and May in Tornado Alley proper, generally thought of as this area right through here. Yeah, plus or minus some geographic areas in there, but you get the idea. But yes, the deep south here, that Dixie Alley, as it has been known to be called in recent years, probably going to be quite active as well, because the Gulf of Mexico down here running warmer than average. That's also been the case for at least the last decade or so, and that's helping to add fuel, energy, moisture, heat, humidity, all of that to the overall mix. All right, want to show you this too. Moderate risk today of what? Of flooding. Very important, flooding. That's today. And then tomorrow, that moderate risk extends up into portions of Missouri, really along the river systems up here. Let's just click on these maps to geographically orient you. There's just not enough that gets made and talked about from the chaser community, the weather service themselves, and then different television networks, whether it's local all the way up to national. They outline it, but not enough is made of the potential threat, I don't think, because we don't think of flooding because you really can't see it until it is happening. You understand? You can see the thunderstorms on radar as they develop. You can see them grow on the HRRR, right? One of the high resolution CAMS models, as we call it. But you don't see flooding until it's actually flooding. And so we have a hard time visualizing it. So in tropical stuff that I usually talk about, we know that there is the risk of flooding from too much rainfall. But these training thunderstorms, because of the way the high pressure is out over the southwest Atlantic, your storm track is up and over that high. You're really squeezing that moisture out. These are fairly slow-moving systems. They're not just racing across the country. And so there's a lot of moisture that can get wrung out over these areas. And then you've got these risk factors here. Moderate risk today for parts of Oklahoma, the extreme northwest corner of Arkansas, and a good chunk of southwest Missouri. But even outside of that, the slight risk in a much larger area. And this needs to be taken very, very seriously. Why? Well, because water, as essential as it is, it can kill you. All right, and then that extends up into, once we get to tomorrow, the rest of Missouri, the southeast part of the state, parts of southern Illinois, northwestern corner there of Kentucky, and then Indiana and parts of Ohio. Just this general area through the Ohio Valley, parts of the Mississippi Valley here. The flood threat is substantial enough that we've got a moderate out. And just like with severe weather, let's go back to the SPC real quick. Drop me out just again for a second. Going to tomorrow, this moderate risk for severe weather, yes, this will get a lot of headlines. A lot of people will be out there. We need to think of the same thing when we think of this for flooding. All right? All right, just making you aware of that. So real quick before we roll things up for today, I want to refresh this over at Tropical Tidbits here. Let's go to the refresh there. This is the high-resolution rapid refresh model, one of the convectively allowing models. Think of it as a computer model like the GFS or the Euro that is super focused mainly on convection, and it really understands those physics better. It is a high-resolution model. It takes more resources, more computing power, more emphasis put into getting the forecast in the short term right. All right, so it's really hyper-focused here on convection. I like it when I'm back up in the corner there. It's just easier for me to stay oriented. But let's drop me out again because I want you to focus on the map down here and not my face. So let's move this out into time. This is today, and we're really going to be focused on that area that I talked about in the severe weather potential. As we move this out into time, this is awesome because it's every hour. We're getting to about 2 p.m. Eastern, so about 1 o'clock Central Time, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. Look what happens late afternoon. The thunderstorms start to develop here in Oklahoma. And the key is, do they become supercells where the whole updraft is rotating? And you know what these look like out there. If you have lived out there for any length of time, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Once they get to do that, all these different factors, what we call the lapse rates and other mechanisms within these supercells, really get jacked up. Once that process happens, it's kind of like a hurricane finding the right conditions, and they can rapidly intensify. We know when we see that happening. We know what happens when that takes place, and a hurricane can really take off. Supercells are similar, that once they find that right environment, and it can only be 2 or 3 hours long in terms of the lifespan of that environment. Hopefully it's only that long. Sometimes that environment is much longer, and you get these long track, long-lived tornadoes. But for today, we're still in March. The sun still getting higher in the sky each day. The days are growing longer slowly. It's not April, it's not May, so the window is just a little bit shorter. That being said, once these develop, if they can get going quickly enough, you can really get some supercell development and the threat of this very large hail that we're talking about, 2 inches plus. So this gets us into the overnight hours. So as you can see, it's parts of Oklahoma here headed towards central Oklahoma. Some of the metroplexes up there, Norman, Oklahoma City, out towards Yukon, the I-40 corridor through there. And of course, these storms will be moving. They don't just pop up and sit there. And then parts of Texas. What is this, the Red River through here? I hope I'm right about that. But the bottom line, you got to pay attention to this. Super big hail coming. If you're traveling out there, you have interest out there, you know people out there. Or if you're chasing out there, hopefully you've got enough sense to avoid these monster hailstones. I mean, they sure are interesting. There are research groups. I think even Mark Rober, the famous YouTuber there that's known for, among other things, the glitter bomb boxes. I think he was studying and doing some interesting things with hail last year. It'll be interesting to see if he's out there again this year. But just pay attention. That's part of what I do. Want to make sure you're on top of it. I'm not out there. I was kind of thinking about it, but with spring break and the plane ticket prices right now, I'm just like, I'm going to wait a little bit. Wait till we get to May, probably, maybe even sometime in April. I want to be out there and set up some of our equipment. I think it would be fascinating to capture some of this big hail using these GoPros now that can shoot in super high frame rates, and we might learn some things about that. Just an interesting way, a different way of looking at things. But not today. Today I'm sitting here in the office in North Carolina telling you all about this. So be paying attention to this. You know, these models are available free of charge over at Tropical Tidbits and other sites like Pivotal Weather. Plenty of it out there that you can tap into. And then, of course, as the afternoon progresses, you got to fire up your favorite radar app. I use RadarScope here and track it in real time. All right? So, yes, the destructive hail potential, that's the main focus today. Pay attention to that if you're in Texas and Oklahoma. And then tomorrow, the threat will shift into the heart of Dixie, roughly speaking anyway, the lower Mississippi Valley. And I will more than likely do a video in the morning, too, to highlight that. And we'll see what kind of hailstones we get from today. All right? We'll tie it all up and do that tomorrow. All right? All right, that is it from me. Have a good rest of your Thursday. Thanks for tuning in. I am Mark Sudduth. I'll be back with another update for you tomorrow morning.